Hello and welcome to another Pairing Pages. I'm Libby Brodie, certified wine consultant and columnist, and I'm here very excitedly talking, well, to a amazing journalist in your own right, travel writer, Annabelle Thorpe, about her latest book, The Village Trattoria, here that we will be talking about. And before we crack into this amazing novel, I'm just quickly talking about our wonderful sponsors for this event, which is Castello Banfi. And you have here two of the three wines that I will be trying over the course of this evening. I'm going to be starting with the wonderful Vermentino, but they're obviously Italian, which suits the book down to the ground, based in Tuscany, but in vineyards all over. They were founded in 1978, but actually started importing in 1919, which is topical for the book because that's the year that Mussolini came to power. And obviously we start in the novel with Mussolini's reign in Italy, but they're owned by an Italian-American family-owned estate. And rather importantly, something I feel that a lot of people are very keen on right now to know is they were the first winery in the world to be awarded international recognition for exceptional environmental, ethical, and social responsibility, which is to be the first in the world is kind of staggering. And they make absolutely delicious wine. Now, primarily they are pioneers in Sangiovese, and we'll be trying some of that a bit later on. Now we're going for an Umbrian classic, the Vermentino, which is absolutely delightful. They have beautiful, I think something like 3,000 hectares, but unlike a lot of wine producers, they actually have got only a third of that to vines. And they also have fruit trees and olive groves and woodlands. It's incredibly beautiful. I want to visit very much, a bit like I want to visit Casa Maria and the whole village in this novel, probably not during that time period though. So I will move on to Annabelle and your amazing work here that we're celebrating today. A quick cheers if you have a glass.
Thank you. Cheers.
Happy days.
Well, oh, that's lovely.
It speaks of summer. It's got all that lovely zesty freshness. It's got a wonderful purity to it. It's an optimistic wine, I think. A happy summertime wine. So on to your travels
Yes.
and work as a travel writer, your background as a travel writer. How does this influence your writing and the vivid descriptions that you conjure?
I think hugely, because I've been really lucky to have been a travel writer for 25 years. And what you do when you're writing a travel piece is you really try and get under the skin of somewhere, and you try and you not just write the obvious things, but really try and give your reader a sense of place. And so I think that really helped me setting this book abroad, because what I wanted to do was not give that kind of very sort of cliched image of how Italy is that sometimes you read, but like to really kind of get a sense of the food and the culture and the traditions, and really bring it alive so that you feel you're there, you can taste the food, you can taste the wine, and really, really immerse yourself in that kind of Italian world.
I definitely agree with that. The book is delicious. I mean, it is so descriptive. Everything is brought back to the flavors and the food and the scents going on. It made me incredibly hungry. But it should come with a disclaimer that you will almost certainly gain weight, because I kept going, really fancy some pasta now. Or, it was so beautifully written. Why did you, of all your many travels and places that you've been, why did you choose to set this novel in Umbria?
I think Umbria really interests me because everybody knows Italy. We all love Italy. It's a huge destination for the British market, and Tuscany, of course, is huge. And Umbria, although it's just the next region down, I think is far less well known. And there's sort of an unspoiledness about it, and a lot of the way that life is lived, particularly in southern Umbria, where my book is set, has changed a lot less. And so I think you're really getting to the heart of Italy and traditional Italy. And that's why I chose Umbria, really, because I went there early on when I was researching it, and I went out in February actually, and so there was, you know, very no tourists there really at all, and I had this amazing sense of a place that was just steeped in tradition and, you know, sort of time-honored ways of doing things. And I just was like, I have to write about this. This is just gorgeous.
How many times have you visited? Or was that your only time, or?
No, so I went there to sort of scope out locations, and then I decided, and this is quite relevant actually because it's a wine town. So the town of Amatino is a fictionalized version of Orvieto, which is a big wine town. So when I realised that that was where I wanted to set it properly, I then went back a few months later and spent a few days actually staying in Orvieto, which is this extraordinary town on this sort of 300-foot high outcrop of rock. And to get up to the old town, you have to go up in a funicular. I mean, there is a road, but you take the funicular up, and there's this just beautiful medieval old town. And I stayed there for a few days, and again, just thought this could almost write itself.
I mean, I have to ask, having been there, the characters you've got are such personalities in the book. They are so well formed, yeah, and recognizable. Were any of them based on people you met out there? Are you allowed to say that? I'm not sure, but were there characters there that you've met?
Well, it's funny you should ask that actually, because I don't normally base my characters on real people, but Giorgio is. I mean, I don't know him at all well, but I met Giorgio Locatelli once years ago, and I just thought he was just fabulous. This guy, great, big, expansive Italian cook, and so that's why Giorgio is called Giorgio. It's just a little tip of my hat to Giorgio Locatelli, who I literally met him very briefly, but he made a real impression on me, and I just thought, what a bon vivant, what a generous spirit. And so that's yes, Giorgio is his namesake.
Brilliant. I would have no idea. And George is, I mean, he's a fantastic character. I think how you developed him and well, obviously the themes running through the book are quite brilliant because he's a character that's been through quite a lot in the past history and then comes through so much decision wise. I don't want to give away anyone who's going to read the book, which you absolutely
Spoilers.
any spoilers. But he's a wonderful character and a very attractive character. Just saying, attractive chap in the book, I would say.
It's quite funny. My editor, Rosie, was we used to say she just seriously had the hots for Giorgio, because whenever I'd see her for any sort of meeting, she would be like, Giorgio, he's so wonderful. It was like he was a real person. So yeah, and also I think, you know, he's great, but he's got, you know, he's got things that aren't so great as well, and you know there are things that, you know, he has to overcome certain things, and I always like to try and write characters that are not 100% great, you know, that have some drawbacks as well, because that's what it is to be human. And so I think that's far more interesting to read about characters like that.
I completely agree with that. And I think yeah, it's interesting how certain characters really change and develop within the book and aren't always the same. But one central pivotal point of the book is Castello itself, the trattoria, and
Yeah,
it's like a character of the book. It's the heart of the whole story, and changes roles itself, like humans change their personality. So what significance did that character, that place, have for you personally, and
I
how
think
did you?
I'm possibly so I think I'm possibly a frustrated restaurant owner, because quite often in my books there is a sort of restaurant, and I think probably it's I grew up in a family where, you know, big meals on a Sunday where everybody came together. I'm from a big family, and now, you know, it's a big thing in my house for people to come and everybody to come and eat together, you know, and so that Italian thing as well of the meals being very important. So I think it's just that sense that actually coming together over food, you know, sharing time, sharing stories, sharing wine is just something that I think it's just a lovely way to spend time, and I think it's really integral to who we are, and I think we should do more of it.
I completely agree. I think obviously I'm in wine, and I think wine is it's the only drink. You know, you've got a can of beer, you've got a cocktail, but wine is literally bottles to be shared. It is made
Absolutely.
at the table with food, with people, and because of that, I think of it as the most sort of community convivial drink, and it's obviously comes from the land and typifies the region that it's grown in, unlike anything else we sort of consume. So I'm with you. I think it's so important. May I ask, do you cook a lot of Italian food? Are you the frustrated restaurateur who can actually cook as well?
I mean, I enjoy cooking. I wouldn't say that if I wouldn't say that if I had a restaurant, I wouldn't be the one in the kitchen. I don't think that would be a very successful restaurant. But I do enjoy. But I think Italian food's quite interesting because you sort of think it's going to be simple. You know, it's a bit of pasta and a bit of oil and a bit of this, that, and the other. And then it doesn't. And then somehow Italians just cook in such a. I think they have such amazing ingredients. So you can make something that's just, you know, the Italians can make something that's just sort of olive oil and lemon and chili and spaghetti, and it's delicious, just so delicious. And then I make it, and it's just not. So I think there is some magic that Italians put into their cooking.
Harmony that brings it together. It's being Italian. We'll never master it because it's just called being Italian.
That's why it's great to go there and eat it. And also I think food in Italy tastes like, you know, you can't get Italian food in this country that tastes like it does in Italy, because they, you know, the tomatoes and the olive oil and all those things, and it just comes straight from the fields. You can't beat it.
When you're writing a place like that, with all the passion that you clearly have for travel and food, how do you bring a venue like that to life in your books? What's the process for that?
In terms of the restaurant,
This place, and you've obviously really got it in your mind. Like, how do you bring it to life?
well, I think it was so I actually saw I was out walking around Orvieto with my husband, and we went down this kind of little alleyway into this courtyard, and I just thought that's it. That's the kind of outside of it. And then I think I think it's quite important to like dress a room so that you do have it in your mind. It's quite important to put those details like the herbs hanging above the bar and the picture of Giorgio and Luigi above the bar and those kind of things. So you imagine it as it then becomes a place that you almost feel you've been to. You know, I think that's quite important. And then you start to kind of imbue it with memory. So you've got, you know, family gatherings and meals, and you write about those, and then gradually it becomes a place that's as real as somewhere you have been, because you know it really intimately, and how the, you know, I know how the door between the restaurant and the kitchen swings back, and those kind of little details, and how many coats are on the pegs and all that kind of thing. So you know, you sort of make it as real as a restaurant you've actually been to and know really well.
That's brilliant. And it's also a great time to me to talk about the second wine that I shall be drinking. Sipping. So we're going on to the Chianti Classico. I love this wine because Chianti is such a wonderful Italian, well-known wine, and it's brilliant for food pairing with a range of dishes, both from Tuscany and Umbria. Obviously, this is a Classico, and in Italy, if you see Classico on a wine, it means that is from the sort of heartland, birthplace, original point where that style of wine began. So it's generally seen as the best terroir for that wine, and also they have to adhere to certain strict regulations to get the best quality. So it's always a good sign to see that on a wine. And this is an absolutely stunning example right here. It's got loads of these really sort of plum blackberry notes. It's a really quite fresh but rich wine. I kind of want to be having a ragu that Elena has cooked me from Casa Maria, because she sounds like an amazing cook. It's crazy how real so many of those characters became to me while I was actually reading the book and salivating over their cooking.
So I think that's the biggest compliment you can pay a writer, is if you talk about their characters like they're real people, then I think that's the biggest compliment you can pay, because that's what you want. You want them to become real in people's minds.
I'm compliment paid. And Isaac, I mean, and Matty, I mean, I mean, lots of them. I would highly recommend anyone who wants a really good read covering and loves their food, lots of stuff food, but obviously all the different themes of sort of love, betrayal, war. It's a sort of an epic novel, even though it's really kept to this small heartland of this village. What inspired you to write the book? And it is a series, I believe. The second one's
well, it's at the moment the sequel is coming out next year. So for anybody who reads it and thinks, well, actually, I've got questions, those questions will be answered. So the Moonlit Piazza will be out in March next year, and will be answering most of those questions. I like to put my characters in a kind of situation sort of in extremis, because then I think that's really interesting in how people cope. And some people cope really well, some people become slightly different versions of themselves. And I think that really interests me, how we cope. And the other thing I think is, wars are, gosh, we are witnessing them at the moment. They are such huge things that it can be quite difficult to remember they're happening to individuals. And so I think, to drill down into one village and then one family and then one couple and look at how the war affected them, I think is a way to kind of make us understand that this is happening to thousands of people, but you need to sort of take it down to an individual level. And that, as I say, that really interests me as well, just to really drill down into one family and see all of the ramifications that it has on them.
Fascinating. And why World War Two? Why Italy? Why World War Two in that of that?
Because I've got I have to be honest, so my editor sort of suggested that it would be a good period to write about. But when I started to do the research, because I'm a bit of a research nerd, so I really like doing the research, I was really struck by how we all know, we're all taught in school, and rightly so, about, what happened with Germany and the UK and the Allies against Germany. But I didn't know a huge amount about what happened in Italy. And I sort of vaguely knew that they changed sides. But the more you read about it, the more it's an extraordinary thing to have happened. They were fighting with the Germans, and then, suddenly they'd signed an armistice and they came over to the Allies side, and the Germans became, an occupying force almost in Italy. And that kind of dramatic about turn is, and I have had, people who read the book who said, I just didn't know. I didn't realize that happened. And so for me, that I just found that whole period of time just fascinating.
Yeah, I'd say it didn't. You're completely correct in that. You know sort of your world war histories, but and you think, oh well, they swapped to the Allies side, and it ended up being the winning side, and that's all good. But actually, it would have been a disaster for so many people on the ground with the Germans just living with them who had been friends and were now occupiers. And I thought it was a really interesting way of, well, a truthful way of talking about it. Yeah, something that I don't think many people would have considered. And that leads me to my next question, actually, about the challenges you face choosing to set a novel in a historical period of turbulence and how you overcome the issues with that.
I think if I'd been writing this possibly even 10 years ago, it would have been a lot more difficult. But now, I mean, it's extraordinary. So I can watch footage on YouTube of, the Germans rolling through the Italian countryside. I can watch, the American general when they finally took Rome, like roaring into Rome in his open top car. There's so much out there that, there's wonderful books written about every aspect of obviously the war, but then I've got a fantastic book that's, oral histories by Italian women who were sort of cooking through the war and how they managed. And, there's an immense amount of stuff out there. And so I think particularly with Italy, there's a lot written, but really just being able to watch this footage, like, on YouTube, it's great for accuracy, because you can actually see what people were wearing and what the tanks looked like and what state the countryside was in, and that's invaluable, because I do think writing about a war is it's a real responsibility, and you have to take that responsibility seriously, and you must get it right, and you mustn't trivialize it, because it was a terrible thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's very wise words for anyone who is writing a book as well. I think there is a responsibility, even if you're writing a novel or something that is made up. As you say, you base this on a sort of real place, and therefore, there have been real people there affected in this way. I am going to quickly move on to the third wine because I'm a quick drinker. But we're going on to the last one is the Rosso de Montalcino. It's actually one of my favorite wines, I have to say. So I was delighted with this paired with the novel. I also noticed that although I thought this wine's probably the most fitting for the book actually of all three, because it's really soft, velvety, seductive. It's got these these alluring dark notes, and I thought of sort of the romance and the nighttime escapades and stuff of the book, but also the label itself has a consecutor, I think, but like a soldier with a flag over the vineyard.
Perfect. So they made it for it.
It basically felt, I was looking at these wines and they're all absolutely delicious, but I felt this one was actually made specifically for the book because it's got these beautiful, I mean, this is one of my favorites. It's been aged in French oak for about 12 months, I think, and it's got these lovely sort of robust fruitiness to it. So it's not a sweet wine, but it's got that sweetness of the fresh fruits, and it's got a bit of that tobacco smoke, a little bit of licorice. So there's something underneath it going on, and it's so sumptuous and beguiling that it sort of made me think of the secretive natures and the romance. And I actually only then noticed the label. I thought, well, this is perfect. This is absolutely funny. Absolutely gorgeous. And I'm wondering with a book like this that has so many themes of love, family, food, loss, loyalty, war. I think it's very interesting, without giving anything too much away. Certain characters feeling not torn between the sides, maybe ambivalent about the two sides. Who's better than who between the Nazis, Mussolini, the Allies? There's all these things going on. So many very human themes going on, and such strong characters that different people may identify with. I was wondering what you hope people will feel they'll be left with, what message they'll be left with, what feeling they'll be left with, what will they take away from this first book of this?
I hope, and this is a really odd thing to say, because it is a book about war and dark things do happen, but I hope they will feel uplifted by it, because at its heart it's a book about love and all the different forms of love. Friendship. I'm a great believer in the love between friends being something that is really sustaining. Then you've got familial love between sons and fathers and sisters, and then of course the central love affair. And I think there's a quote in the book where Massimo, the priest, says war is the enemy of love, and the greatest triumph is to kind of overcome, is to continue to love and to not let war win. And I hope that is the message from the book, that actually even in the most traumatic and tempestuous of times you can continue to love, and that's what keeps you strong, and that's what helps you to come out of the other side.
That is a message I hope we can all take towards the future. I think it's very much a resounding theme of the book. The romance is wonderful, but it is all those other interlocking relationships, the caring goes on. For me, Elena and Isaac, who are an elderly couple, elderly friends in the book, the way they talk to each other, interact with each other, the strength of their friendship and their bond and of them as people, that really stayed with me. And I would be surprised if everyone who read this book, people weren't affected by different characters. People go, that relationship really stood out for me, or that that moment really. So I don't know how you, as one single writer, manages to create all these different moments between different relationship setups that will move different people in different ways. Is that something you juggle? Is it sometimes easier to write certain relationships than others for you, or how do you grow all these different dynamics?
Yeah, I think some are easier, and Eleanor and Isaac I love, and I think that's because their friendship is something I aspire to. I have, friends that I've been friends with for 30 years, and I think to be friends with them for another 30 years would be wonderful. But I think actually, if we all look at our own lives, we all do have these very different kind of types of love. We all have friends that we adore and family members that we just love to pieces, and then our partners, or our pet, or we have all these different forms of love in our lives. And that for me is something I find fascinating, and the kind of different ways that affects us and the different shapes and forms that those relationships take. And I just love exploring those. I just love the sort of interplay and interaction between people in different ways. And actually, in a way, I think for me, the central classic love affair, whilst, you know, lovely to write, is probably the least interesting to me, because it is quite straightforward. It is, you know, whereas kind of, you know, relationships that are perhaps a little bit unusual or a little bit on the edges or a little bit, you know, they're the ones that really interest me.
Right, it's absolutely fascinating. It's a wonderful, wonderful novel. Highly recommend it to everyone. You will get hungry. You need to stock up on pasta, cold meats, cheeses. Just stock up, and of course, gorgeous, gorgeous wines. Castello Banfi. Is there anything you would like to say more about your writing or this novel?
Just no, I think your questions have been lovely. Thank you. And I guess I would just say, you know, sit yourself down with a nice glass of wine, and you know, that's the best way to enjoy the book. That's how the Italians would want you to enjoy the book.
Great. Okay, it's very Italian that way. Well, thank you so much, Annabelle, for spending this time with me and talking more about your beautiful book. And thank you so much to Castello Banfi for the wonderful wines, which I am now going to finish. Thank you. But they
Good
are
for you.
beautiful and perfect, perfect for the book. Thank you all, and have a very lovely evening.